Thank you. Thank you very much, Naja. It's great to see all the colleagues online and to be back, albeit virtually, into the electoral community. And we're very excited about this event. So just to give you an official welcome again on behalf of DPPA, EAD, Electoral Assistance Division, and also UNDP to this event. And as you know, it's taking place within the context of the Commission on the Status of Women, which we're celebrating the 65th year of, which is an impressive achievement. And the priority theme for this year's CSW is women's full and effective participation and decision-making in public life, as well as the elimination of violence in all its forms for achieving gender equality and empowerment of women and girls. And in this panel, specifically, we're going to hear from four distinguished colleagues from different elements, if you will, or different institutional perspectives on this issue of how electoral management bodies, specifically EMBs, can help play this role of fostering more effective participation, but also eliminating violence. And at first blush, that may seem like a interesting combination, two things that don't really go together, effective participation in political life and violence. But we are seeing actually in reality that they do have very important linkages. And we're seeing, unfortunately, a bit of, if you will, an uptick in many places, violence against women who do seek to run for office or become more politically involved. So we're going to hear very interesting experiences at the national level, regional level, and also global level of how to really tackle this issue of getting more women into electoral processes, be it as voters, as members of electoral management bodies, as candidates, and how we get more effective development outcomes as a result. And really, it's you might ask why are we doing this? I think it's worth taking a step backwards and saying, women's participation in decision making is important as an end, if you will, to achieving more just societies, to sustaining peace and conflict. It's also the right thing to do. So it's both a means and an end, if you will. And we do see, from UNDP at least, from a human development perspective, that societies that are more equal do attain and sustain greater levels of human development. So not just the right thing to do, but also the smart thing to do is to have more equal societies. So I don't want to extend too much time on the introductory remarks to leave time for our panelists. But just to say that, this is a timely discussion. This is still a challenge. I think we've all seen in recent years that progress is not linear, that we do see backsliding. We do see challenges, new challenges come in, be it in terms of social media or just certain agendas, which don't necessarily want to see that equal and empowered participation of everyone. So with that context, perhaps I'll just say what we're going to hear is from each of the panelists. In turn, I will introduce each one of them before their remarks. Again, if you're having any issues with the interpretation that's available, please alert Osama in the chat to this. But again, just to reiterate for those who have just joined us, interpretation is available in English, French, Spanish, and Arabic through the globe icon at the bottom of your screen. So I'm going to give the floor to each panelist. They will have 10 minutes in which to express their experience. And I'd like to begin with Dr. Salvador Romero. Hopefully his bio can also be portrayed on the screen, but Dr. Romero is currently the president of the Bolivian electoral body. Just to note that he does have a flight to catch following this event, so he might not be able to join us for the full time. But he's going to share the experience of Bolivia's recent elections. You can see his bio there, which saw a very impressive change. We saw Bolivia go to the first rank, if you will, in the lower house and the third rank in the upper house in terms of percentage of women elected to parliament. So that's really a spectacular achievement. And he's going to focus on the role he and his institution played in achieving these gains. So you can see that President Romero has a long and distinguished career, both in applied policy and in academia in Bolivia and even internationally. So without further ado, Salvador, it's good to see you again. And please, you have the floor. Over to you. So please, just to unmute yourself, if you will. Perfect.
Muchas gracias, Linda, y muchas gracias por la invitación.
Thank you for inviting me. I'd like to talk about the experience
del fortalecimiento de la participación política.
We really managed to improve the participation of women and the political field in a special manner, really. I have a presentation that comprises 4 sections. The first one is about the location. I will talk about the achievement and some of the challenges that we are facing to improve the situation of women participation. Let's start about the actual situation from where we started. In Bolivia, we started in a similar way as all the Latin American countries. Because at the 90s, the political participation of women are only for legislative assembly or for the parliaments only. And it was around 30% participation, but in other Latin American countries, there were quotas. The quota improved a little bit the participation. That means the elements of obligatory or compulsory participation to have the quota were the first achievements to obtain. And these were really the leading presence to the women to participate in the parliament. Then with the development of democracy, actually the situation has improved. When Bolivia go back to democracy, and we will have both high camera and low camera in the parliament, as it was in the 65. What was the situation by then? Yeah, there were several achievements, several important achievements. The improvement of gender situation, that mean the equity and equality between men and women. But the women presence was not in parity, really, but the women were looking for alternate some positions, some political positions in Bolivia. and I'll talk about other results from the alternating of urgent positions. We have 4 factors that explain the results. Without those factors, it was very difficult to obtain such achievements. The first factor that we have the favorable rules and regulations. This is the first thing. Without laws, without rules and regulations, you cannot develop positive results. The second issue is the positive attitude of EMBs, a positive attitude of EMBs, the application of all rules and regulations, and the commitment of EMBs. The third issue is then that the attitude developed by the civil society organizations and other female organizations to push forward the movement or the political participation of women. And the last issue, the participation, the active participation of the political activists with the application of all the EMB's rules and regulations in force. That allows us to develop a little bit. This was the actual situation. What was the achievement actually of Bolivia? And now we have a General Assembly, and it is with equal participation of women. That means half of the parliaments. The assembly was elected in past October, and the High Camera has 56% of the MPs are women. That means that women are majority in the High Camera, and in the Low Camera, which is the parliament, we have 48% of women participation. These percentages or these figures represent important participation or important achievements for the Bolivian women. And that means there is a high representation of all society levels. We have around 50% of women, and in the local democracy governments at the municipality committees as well, we have around 50%. 50% are of women parliament, women members. So all the provinces and all the municipal elections has around 50% or more from women. So we can conclude that there is a good female representation at the municipal committees level. Some of the limitation, the principal limit is for executive posts, executive posts for the assembly. The leadership sometimes these are unique posts. For example, the presidency, the governors, or the mayors. These are the situation that those posts or we have less women representation in at these posts. So there is no legal obligation for or any rule or regulation to improve the participation of women at those levels, because in the last elections we had we had 40% of the candidates to mayors and to governors. I can conclude talking about the challenges of what we talked about. The important challenge is the harassment. Sometimes the women suffer from harassment, and this is a problem we are facing actually, mainly in public field. But as a new issue that we may develop a new social culture to improve the actual situation and to reduce the harassment. This is a phenomenon in all Latin American countries, and some of other international countries are suffering from harassment. So we have to prevent violence, we have to prevent harassment. And this is a problem not only in Bolivia, but in other regions. Bolivia is committed to give a name to that political challenge. We even call it political harassment. This allow us to identify certain cases and whether institutional, political, social issue or any problem that the woman is facing. This is really a challenge for the country, for all political institutions as well. And we have to confront that problem and to reduce drastically to reduce the harassment, mainly the political harassment, and to improve the woman environment to have a better freedom. Appreciate your invitation. Thank you very much for inviting me to the side activity, and welcoming to have other activities in order to continue the improvement. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that excellent and very well structured and concise presentation. And I think you had so many nuggets of analysis for us, both on hard and soft measures, if you will, that have worked, and hopefully will continue working and reap benefits in terms of effective development outcomes. But from the percentage and placement of women on lists to the softer things about commitment and political will and the predisposition, if you will, of political actors to take this commitment. So thank you so much. I'd like to move on to our next panelist, also speaking from the country level, Her Excellency Hasna Ben Sliman, who will be speaking on the Tunisia experience as a current minister and former election commissioner. You can see her bio on the screen, and the first director of the Arab Network for Women in Elections. She's going to speak on the Tunisia experience and also the role that Tunisia's independent High Electoral Commission played, and the challenges and opportunities that exist for electoral management bodies to move forward on the women's political participation agenda. She's also going to touch on the efforts of EMBs, in particular in the Arab region, to prioritize women's political participation and about her role in launching the network in 2019. So the minister is going to be giving her remarks in Arabic. So just a reminder to avail yourselves of the interpretation facilities that is available to you. So thank you so much, Excellency. Thank you in advance for your words, and over to you.
شكرا جزيلا.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Welcome to you all in this important meeting to talk about the political participation and electoral participation of women, an experience that we wanted to share, the Tunisian experience, but also from the aspect of the Arab Network for Women. So in the beginning, I would like to say that this outcome of the participation of women is still much less than participation of women, except for some experiences, and we've been listening to one of them. So generally, the participation of women is still much less at the electoral level and political level. That's why a lot of countries, Tunisia, one of them, and also other countries in the region, they worked on developing their legislations to be a motivation to increase the participation of women and to have women as a leader or in a leading positions, because today this is inarguable. This is a motive for the whole community to have such equality in representation between men and women. So such commitment is a commitment to respect rights, is a commitment of not violating anybody's right. This is a commitment to be made by the government and all the public institutions to make sure, maybe this is stipulated by laws and texts, but also to be a realistic commitment. It's an international commitment, and Tunisia has ratified a lot of agreements that tackle the issue of maintaining women's rights, like CEDAW and other international covenants. And it was stipulated according to the stipulated in the Tunisian constitution, and there's a law for 1969. There is a guarantee for the women participation in the elections, and she's been participating since then. So this is a fixed outcome according to the constitution, but actually we cannot ignore that equality wasn't achieved totally, especially that prior to 2011, there was kind of a pressure from the side of the ruling party in specific direction. So it didn't maintain the equality for women. So after 2011, and you may know that post 2011 there was a democratic transmission in Tunisia, and there was a main incident which was the elections of 2011 for the National Council. That was a first time to have an independent electoral commission to manage and supervise elections as a neutral party that can guarantee equality among us all. And we had the order number, I think she said 35 for 2011, and it was a social request for all the community to have equality between men and women, and the electoral law was included in that order, and the principle of half-half in representation, taking into consideration the rule of equal seats, like for example, if we have 10 seats in the party that is nominating their members, so this means that it needs to be 5 of men, 5 of women, and then according to the results, the position is going to be given for the highest votes, or for those who won the highest votes. Such legislation was also implemented within the electoral law in 2017, and also in the municipal elections in 2017, we also adopted the half-half principle, meaning if a party, a political party, is nominating its members in more than one constituency, so the heading of the lists need to be between men and women equally. This achieved a specific percentage of positions held by women, and was in adaptation of 104 of the Constitution, because it stipulates that the government need to work on giving the women chances to be in positions of public positions, and also the state need to maintain such gained rights and to guarantee equal opportunities between men and women to have the responsibilities in different aspects. Excuse me. So those were the efforts and the endeavors of the government, but such endeavors didn't achieve the 50% aspired. In 2014, the percentage was about 30%, and this didn't achieve. Even in 2018, we had less percentage for reasons that I will mention later. So the electoral body, what was its law? That was in the legislative part, but also the IEC implements a perspective that works on equality and achieving equality pertaining the reality of men and women. And this faced the commission since 2011, and it developed in 2014 and 2019. They work on having the female candidates sorry, not the candidates, the registered voters to have the right to vote. And then in 2019, it worked on eliminating the differences, and we reached 49% of the registered women. So the registered voters, 49 of them are women, and we have more of men because we have like 4 million of registered voters. So in the candidacy, the list, we also adopted the principle of equality, but as results, we still didn't have the 50 percentage, and we are working on increasing this percentage, and the Commission worked on having a clear strategy to increase the percentage of participation of women in all the stages of the electoral process. But there is also the work with different stakeholders in the electoral process, because the Commission is the core of work. It works with civil society, with political parties, with the activists, to train people or to make them aware that it is important to have lists that are women-headed. And also, there is the right for financing the campaigns, the electoral campaigns, and to give the same opportunity for men and women as equal. And maybe in addition of enabling women to go vote, to cast their ballots in some accessible voting centers, and to provide them with the transportation, the thing that we had some problems with. So we worked with the civil society to limit such problems, and we're still doing our efforts. We are still exerting our efforts. In addition to that, IEC has some work outside the elections. They work on raising awareness and education, voters education. And in this respect, it cooperates with the Ministry of Education and to disseminate the culture of transparent elections, and that was done with a lot of associations, the Ministry of Women, with some other partners in the electoral process. In the late 2017 elections, we had a percentage over 25% of the seats. And we had 2 female candidates for the presidential elections out of 26 candidates for the presidential elections. So they were accepted as candidates.
Mais après, le résultat était entre 2 hommes, c'est-à-dire pour les élections présidentielles, pardon, pas principales, présidentielles. Donc, dans ce cadre, la commission
IEC is also working to exchange experiences with other countries that has the same transition, democratic transition they want to develop, especially regarding the statistics, the figures, and the mutual work on clear objectives within an Arab regional framework, and Tunisia is a member in the board of the Arab EMBs, this platform, this organization that gather elections, electoral bodies from Jordan, Sudan, Palestine, Djibouti, Mauritania, in addition to Tunisia, and such a regional structure adopted since 2016 a recommendation which is establishing a network to coordinate and to support the political participation and the electoral participation of women, and to have a gender mainstreaming in this process, whether in elections or even in the bodies, in the electoral bodies and administrations, for her big role, and also to empower her to have leading positions, leading posts, and her important presence in the public affairs and in the public life. October the 5th, 2018, we officially launched the Arab Network for Women in Election, and it was unprecedented.
réseau a des partenaires et des membres tels que les administrations électorales sont membres dans ce réseau, mais aussi les institutions régionales qui travaillent dans le domaine de soutien aux femmes et travaillent dans les élections.
And such participation is also at the level of the or steering committee. So she participate in decision making at this network, and also in closing the gap between the administrations and the civil society, and they are contributing a lot. The Arab Network for Women in Elections, the Democratic Network for Arab Women, and other associations. I was honored to head the steering committee, and this work continued to have a strategic direction for the network, to know what is the action plan, to coordinate all these efforts, to coordinate amongst all these objectives, to follow up on the political participation on a regional level, and also to monitor. And this is very important. It's very important to monitor and to see the outcomes so we can overcome the obstacles that could hinder women's participation, and also to study the most significant statistics, because without figures, we cannot measure the improvement, especially together with our partners, members of our networks, and to give such support at the time of women's participation and believing in women participation, not mentioning the documentation of all such efforts. The network aims right now to implement training programs for the leading women, among which is the training training on leadership for a number of female parliamentarians, in addition to those employees that are already at the electoral bodies.
Candidates et les électeurs. Aussi, nous avons, dans ce cadre, on aimerait bien essayer d'éliminer
that we want to institutionalize, which is combating violence against women. We started issuing a document in this respect, and we want to support it even more. And the network can be a space to support such idea and to make it achievable. In addition to that, we want the network to be a gathering framework to adopt more strategic approaches for the support of women. And we hope that the electoral bodies and the Arab countries can have this work into consideration and not to work in silos. And this would enable us to achieve our objectives at all levels. So all this work, in addition to raising awareness and training through the network, all of this is a work that need to be supported and need to continue. And so that we would have experiences, we would have expertise at a regional level, so they can talk and they can document the participation, the political participation of women. And these outcomes are going to be scientific, that can enable us to improve even more. I don't want to take longer. I wanted it to be brief, but actually I want to stress out the importance of the electoral bodies. And I was honored to head one of them. And now I have a portfolio, a ministerial portfolio, but I still continue cooperating with all electoral bodies. Thank you.
Remarks, and we can also see that there actually are, I think, some similarities between the cases of Tunisia and Bolivia. But I really liked the way you talked, you know, about the particular challenges facing women in accessing the polls. Also your personal experience as a woman in politics. Some questions are coming in about you know, people who are interested actually in being more involved. So your personal experience, perhaps in the Q&A, we can talk about more even. And also the role of electoral management bodies in fostering more participation of women, and also women being heads or leaders or members of electoral management bodies as well, has come up in some of the chat. So thank you so much for those remarks. I'm going to move on to the next speaker, who can also talk about women's roles in electoral management bodies, Dr. Roslyn Akombe, who's currently with UNDP, actually covering the Africa region. She has extensive experience, as you will see from her bio on the screen, in electoral administration as a former commissioner in Kenya. She is going to touch in her remarks on the state of affairs on women's political participation in Africa, and also share her thoughts about the opportunities, the challenges that exist for promoting women's political participation in Africa, and perhaps lessons that hold relevance for other regions. So without further ado, Roslyn, I'm going to give you the floor. Before doing so, just to remind colleagues, there are some questions and comments coming in, both in the chat and bilaterally. So please, please do share your thoughts and questions, and we will open after the last speaker to have an exchange. So Roslyn, over to you.
Thank you very much, Linda, and really nice to have you back to the election field. You know, when I think about elections and I think about UNDP, it's always your name really that comes into mind, given your role really in that role. So we will always drag you back to the family of elections, which is a very small one. and which is a very good one. I see very many colleagues that we've worked with. I acknowledge Craig Jeunesse, obviously, who is the reason for all my problems, having encouraged me to go and work with the Independent Election and Boundaries Commission. But before that, got me to work election observer mission.
Rosalind, we're having trouble hearing you a little bit. It was good at the beginning, but then.
Let me go back to.
That's good. That's good right there.
Listen now?
Yep. Yep.
Sorry, I was removing the AirPods because they were not being very clear for me. So I was blaming obviously Craig for everything, and I can blame him now for my hearing difficulties and listening difficulties. But I'll try and be very quick because I think a lot of the things that I would have wanted to say have already been said. So I'll not try and repeat them, but maybe I'll focus on 4. And those really relate to both from my experiences of working on elections within the UN system, but also as a commissioner with the Independent Election and Boundaries Commission. First, to stress that transparent, credible, effective, elections, if they are handled well, they benefit everybody. And so even as we think about representation of women, we talk about increasing the participation of women in decision making. If we emphasize actually in ensuring that we have credible processes, that we have free, fair, and credible elections, then, by virtue of that, frankly, you will have dealt with issues of inclusion and in a lot of the things that we need to be able to ensure that we have we have societies or we have elections that reflect the will of the people. And so just need to emphasize that even as we work on issues of gender and inclusion of women and women in decision making, to emphasize that without, in places where we do not allow for credible, free, fair, and credible elections to take place, it undermines everything. It undermines minorities, it undermines women, it undermines the rule of law. And so it's important that we keep emphasizing on that. The second one is really on campaign financing. And really, if there is one thing that really restricts the participation of women in politics, it is that. And we are seeing more and more in a lot of African countries, the cost of elections becoming very high. And without laws that regulate really how we finance elections, and we allow political parties or individuals to invest in that, we are going to limit the participation.
Nous allons limiter la participation de la femme parce que nous avons
we have income inequalities in countries. And so if election management bodies have a responsibility of ensuring that in places, and I've looked at some of the laws that we have in many countries in Africa. Some of them have provisions, but the EMBs actually have the authority in a lot of the countries to come up with laws and regulations that would limit that. And I think that is one area we haven't done very well in. I know that within the Independent Election Boundaries Commission of Kenya, we made the attempt. We actually came up with the financing regulations, but Parliament did not approve it. And so it got stuck, and we were not able to use it for the 2017 election. But it's an area that is really important. And maybe, it's the regulations, but it's also really working with partners who care about increasing the representation of women, and saying that you cannot care about representation of women without looking at how they are financed and how they are campaigned and how they are able to do their campaigns. And that restricts a lot of people's participation. And so for partners who are interested in supporting women and increasing the representation of women, that is an area that we need to look at in terms of campaign financing, both from the side of regulation and figuring out how you handle that, but also from financing campaigns that allow women to participate. Because frankly, a lot of the money that is used for campaigns come from corruption. And you will find that if you're looking at the numbers in terms of the number of women who are involved in the money, the corruption angle, you can't compare. So just to say that that's a second angle that is really important. The third one, for me, that relates to violence, how you address issues of violence against women, is a new area that I as somebody who had to endure that, really think is an area we need to focus a lot on. It's what we are seeing now with the misinformation, disinformation, hate speech, the use of technology to bully, either whether it's female candidates, or to slander, or it's people working or women working in actually election management bodies, which I had a fair share of my own, and it's an area that we haven't researched a lot in, and I know that our colleagues within the UNDP team in Brussels is looking at it, but the area of misinformation, disinformation, and its impact really on elections and election outcomes, but more particularly on women, and the impact that it has on the mental health of women, and how it impacts their ability to then continue and work out in campaigns is really important. And then the last one I would want to mention is a lot of election management bodies, when you look at in the African context, have opportunities to deal with issues of enforcement when they are when you're looking at disciplinary, taking disciplinary measures. For the election management body that I worked in, the IEBC, we had the power. I mean, so we had the authority. It's about the election management body using the authority that it actually already has in dealing with disciplinary issues that, and a lot of it could also includes violence, really, looking at how you avert violence by threatening to not to clear a particular candidate, we had cases in which we had to suspend campaigns. I mean, at the heat of a campaign, and we realized it worked. It does work by putting penalties and telling people you will have to pay this amount of money. If you don't, we're going to take you out of the ballot, and it works. And sometimes that's what that is the area that I wish I had done more. When I reflect back, I think there's much more that I could have done, that we could have done, in terms of using the authority that we had in really imposing very tough fines, because there was no limit to the fines we could give. I mean, we had a lot of flexibility. So it's using the authority that the EMB already has to really enforce the existing laws, to avert violence and be able to look at issues of legal, violations of electoral law. And I know that is not the case for all EMBs, but for those that have that, it will really be important for them to use that authority that they already have. And as I conclude, just to say again what I started with, that election management bodies have an important role to play by first ensuring that they do their first job of being honest brokers, of being arbiters, of ensuring that they have free, fair, and credible election, because it helps everybody else. But also that they cannot do that on their own. Sometimes I think we put a lot of pressure on EMBs as though it's only them. They are players in a bigger political space where you need political will from the various political parties. You need a constituency that comes and rallies itself, frankly, around EMBs. Sometimes EMBs want to do the right thing, but there are no civil society actors that are cheering them on. The international community, is quiet sometimes and doesn't, that constituency of support that you need sometimes when you're doing tough things, tough decisions that need to be made is really important, because it emboldens then the election management body to be able to do its work.
And I stop there, 10 minutes, over to you.
Excellent, thank you. That was very well timed and super useful in terms of all the content you shared with us and the personal experience. Thank you, Rosalind. And I like that you brought up the misinformation and disinformation and its impact. I would say even disproportionate impact on women. In some countries, we've seen really campaigns fostering violence really against women candidates that are just very, very disheartening to see. And your last comment about a sort of EMBs are a key and central player, obviously, but really some of these issues take a whole of society approach. And we'll get into that, I think, in the Q&A, because many of the questions are really going to getting at root causes of this status quo that we see. So, but before we get there, I'd like to go to our fourth and final panelist. Our next guest needs no introduction, Mr. Craig Jeunesse, who is the director, of course, of the Electoral Assistance Division of the Department of Political and Peace Building Affairs. He brings decades of practice and practical experience in electoral assistance. And many of us on this call in this webinar have worked personally with Craig and can attest to his great knowledge and also his humanity in approaching these issues, which are very thorny issues and impact on people's day-to-day lives. So he's going to focus his remarks on the UN's efforts in promoting women's electoral and political participation, and also share with us what he has seen in terms of some good practices, some lessons learned from around the world with a wide range of stakeholders. So we will have the country picture, a regional picture, and now Craig will give us sort of the global perspective. So without further ado, Craig, you have the floor.
Thank you, Linda, for that very kind introduction. Just reminds me how old I'm getting. But thanks very much. I'd like to commend all of those involved in organizing this event and thank all of those people participating. Really is an honor for me to be part of the panel with Her Excellency Minister Ben Slimani, President Romero, my good and dear friend, Her Excellency Ms. Akombe, and of course you, Linda, who have always been such a friend and a champion for democracy and equality, both in your current job, but also in your previous positions. Let me try not to take up too much time because I know there's a lot of, let me turn on my clock here. There's a lot of discussion to be had. I think the international legal frameworks and obligations of all member states are pretty clear. The background materials are good. We all know that women's full and equal participation in political and electoral processes is a basic right derived from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and other key documents, including CEDAW. We all know there's been an improvement in women's political participation in the last 2 decades, but it's been uneven and slow. Most of you know the figures, just a couple of them. Of course, women make up over half of the world's population, but only 11% of countries are led by a woman head of state or government. There are only 21% globally of government ministers are women. And while women legislators have doubled since 1995, they comprise only about 25% of national legislators at the global level. The only main point I wanted to make here is that there are regional differences, but this is not a regional problem. Progress is necessary in developing countries as well as developed democracies in the global north as well as the global south. It's pretty telling that there's only 3 countries in the entire world that have full gender parity, 50% or more women in parliament. Some of the examples today, how to tackle this, at least in the area that we're talking about, laws and policies was the first thing I think that President Romero spoke about. Temporary special measures is one particular area. Electoral system design is another. Any state which has ratified CEDAW is legally and politically obligated to consider temporary special measures to enhance women's political participation. This can include quotas, as you know, but other measures such as financial incentives and disincentives. I actually encourage everyone to read CDOT General Recommendation 25, which is about temporary special measures. It's thoughtful and measured, and it contains pretty compelling language, including explanations of why temporary special measures should not themselves be considered discrimination. I think the minister mentioned this point. It's something that comes up often in our discussion with member states. Of course, quotas and temporary special measures can make a major difference, but alone they will not necessarily bring about expected results or at the desired pace. Technical details, proper design, implementation, including by EMBs, is crucial. And of course, political and societal commitment is what will ultimately determine success. Electoral systems, of course, they really matter. Just a couple of small points there. Obviously, quotas and temporary special measures work differently depending on the electoral system. There's no best electoral system. It's for member states to decide which system is most suited to their particular social, legal, and political context. However, it is true that the Beijing Declaration, as well as General Assembly resolutions, require all UN member states to review the differential, and I'm quoting now, review the differential impact of their electoral systems on the political participation of women and their representation in elected bodies, and to adjust or reform those systems where necessary. This is, we've been talking here about obviously electoral management bodies and the key role they play. You know, we've heard from the distinguished panelists today a lot of ideas, and I wouldn't presume to add much to their collective wisdom. I have had the honor of sitting on 3 electoral management bodies, and maybe 4 takeaways I would take from my own experience there in terms of, you know, what we tried to do or focus on most to improve what women's political participation were. First of all, implement the applicable temporary special measures. Electoral management bodies are not responsible for the laws, but they must be willing and capable of implementing them. And Rosalind, amongst others, mentioned the importance of enforcement. And this is important, knowing full well that parties may not necessarily meet the targets of their own accord. So electoral management bodies, you know, we had to do constant urging and constant dialogue, but electoral management bodies must be prepared to impose penalties and fines, even as such things as disqualifications, if necessary, in order to enforce the laws about temporary special measures. Focus on prevention of violence against women, candidates, and voters. I think all the speakers spoke about this, so I won't go into much detail there. Of course, electoral management bodies are not the police, nor in most cases do they have criminal enforcement powers. But there's a lot they can do, including working with security forces, applying electoral sanctions where they can, those kind of things. I won't get into the issue, and it's a very big issue, of online threats and harassment of women in politics. It's been covered by others. But as Rosalind and others said, it's a difficult area, one that we're just learning globally how to tackle. And I guess more discussions is required there. In my time on the electoral management bodies, we focused a lot on ensuring voter information and polling procedures were sensitive and targeted to women's needs. I don't think I need to say much more there. Most of you know and can probably give better examples. And the last was to try to set a good example. I think, Linda, you mentioned the importance of having women commissioners, gender parity on the commission, gender parity in hiring in the commission, including in senior leadership positions in the commission, a proper workplace environment, including training of staff on gender sensitivity, zero tolerance for harassment in the institution, those kind of things. So those are 4 areas that, at least in my limited experience, we tried to focus on. Of course, these need effective leadership, and they need financial and material resources. but they also really need the support of others. And everyone mentioned that, and I think that was Rosalind's last point. And I absolutely agree. The efforts of electoral management bodies, as Rosalind said, maybe paraphrase her, electoral management bodies are sometimes thought of as responsible and in charge of everything, but they have their constitutional authorities, but they are only, players in a larger process. And they can only succeed if other actors such as political parties, the media, security forces, civil society actors, and others are engaged and supportive of the electoral management bodies. Political parties must ensure women are nominated as candidates and that women are placed in winnable races and winnable places on party lists. We've talked about the role of police and security forces in helping ensure female candidates can campaign freely and equally, and women voters can participate without fear. We touched on the media and their responsibilities, and I know we're running out of time, so I'll try to go quickly here. Minister Silliman in particular mentioned the important role of civil society organizations. Their voice and their networks at grassroots levels in particular are critical to awareness raising, advocacy, and holding politicians and institutions accountable. Religious and traditional leaders can be especially influential in encouraging support for women's political participation. Of course, at the end, it's political leaders themselves that are most responsible for credible elections and more broadly for safeguarding gender equality. I guess my last point would be, of course, support to women's political participation is one of the highest priorities, of the Secretary General. We provide the UN electoral assistance to more than 50 member states. UNDP is the largest provider of electoral support, including to electoral management bodies, but we also have extensive, important programming from UN Women and others. There are many, many people on the call that are engaged in the activity of electoral assistance, including to support women's political participation. And I guess I would just close by saying, I think for all of us, it continues to be an honor to support colleagues like Minister Silliman, Dr. Romero, and all our member states in their efforts, to ensure credible elections, as Rosalind talked about, for the purposes that we all wish, and to promote women's political participation. Thank you. I think I took 10 minutes.